Hello and welcome to another weekly update. Hope you've had a good week. Had a really fun week. It's been Microsoft Build this week. Really good conference, virtual conference obviously, but Microsoft kept the date the same and flipped from being in person to virtual at really kind of short notice, and I think it's been a real success. It's been really good. Lots of blog posts to go through, but yeah, lots of really interesting content from this year's big Microsoft Developer Conference. Alright, so where are we going to start? So there's 16 sessions that I posted before the conference started that are kind of a really good way of skilling up across the Microsoft 365 development space. So not just Microsoft Teams, but covering lots of interesting things actually. The things you might expect around graph and identity, yes, Teams app development as well, but also some other things, Project Cortex for instance, some WinUI stuff. So yeah, 16 sessions. If you watched all 16, it's a really good way of getting up to speed across the board with what is happening in Microsoft 365 development. Or you can scan down the list and pick off some things that are interesting to you that maybe you haven't had time to dig into, like Cortex or, I don't know, creating trustworthy applications, all sorts of things. So good list of 16 that I'm kind of calling out separately from all of the other great build content. Alright, so I put out a couple of blog posts once Build had started with a wrap up for some news. So I'm going to quickly go through those, but I'm going to kind of refer you to the blog posts for the real detail. Firstly, there was a lot of updates put out by the Bot Framework SDK team, well the whole Bot Framework team actually, specifically around Bot Framework SDK, and some good and really interesting new announcements that came from them. A couple of really good things. So there's now support in GA for Amazon Alexa, and I want to say as well also Google Home as well. So that's worth checking out. Really interested by that, the support for that. I'm going to be trying to do something with that next week, so look out for a blog post on that, and there'll be some code samples as well coming for that as well. Bunch of other enhancements as well. Lots of new, some kind of new functionality for Teams developers working in Bot Framework and Teams. Some support there. Java support, I think, has reached parity on the SDK as well, which is really good. So lots of good things coming out of that team actually. So that's good to see. Looking specifically at Microsoft Teams development, resource-specific consent is now in developer preview. I talked about this quite a long time ago when it was announced at Ignite, because there's a really good session on it at Ignite. And it's now available to anyone in developer preview, so that's very exciting. And so I went through some details there in that blog post. Completely separate from resource-specific consent, which is a very specific type of permission set, there's actually also more granular graph permissions, and this is really good. This is something that I've certainly been asking for a long time, and I know lots of people have been asking for, so it's really good to see this coming. More granular Microsoft Graph permissions. This means that your application can be scoped. The permissions you're asking your IT admins or your companies, your customers' IT admins to approve your app for can now be way better scoped than they were before. Really, really good news. Really going to unblock a lot of people trying to, a lot of ISVs trying to get their apps into organizations. So that's really, really good to see. Massive kind of thumbs up on that for me. Also announced this year at Build, the ability and the API call that you can use to send messages to channels has gone to 1.0 from beta. So if you're an organization that has to use the 1.0 train, not the beta stuff, which really should be everyone for production, but I know like internal apps and stuff might sometimes be different, but for production stuff you can now send messages to channels, and also now supports attachments and cards and app mentioning as well. So that's cool. I did a blog post with some sample code in there for how you can do all of that. Oh, so much stuff. And then on top of that, there's a whole raft of interesting sessions that Build that anybody can now watch. They're all available on demand to consume. I'm going to specifically call out the developer keynote. So Scott Hanselman and some guests did a developer keynote. If you're a developer, not just a Teams developer, a developer of any sort, it's good content. You should watch it. It's a Scott Hanselman keynote. You know you're going to get some good content. If you're not a developer, but you're in the team space, I'm going to say go and watch it anyway, because it is a good masterclass in how to use Microsoft Teams really well for an engaging session, like a recorded session, for an engaging conference call, whatever else it is. It's a good masterclass in all sorts of things. It's a good masterclass in the good lighting and camera setup. It's a good masterclass in Teams usage. It's a good masterclass in how to present for 45 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it is. I can't remember now the session length, and keep it engaging. I would say just kind of watch it for that rather than the technical content. I think you'll find a lot of the technical content interesting as well, even if you're not like a hardened developer, because a lot of it is really accessible. But I think it's worth watching just for the production value alone. And then finally, I'm going to leave you with a link to all of the 2020 sessions at mybuild.microsoft.com, because look through, there's bound to be stuff in there. All in all, it's been a really fun week with all the kind of build content. It's been really interesting to kind of catch up on. I think congratulations to Microsoft for a really good conference under some pretty unusual circumstances. We already know Microsoft has said they're not doing in-person events until at least July 2021, so I expect we'll see more virtual conferences. But if they're like this, I think they're going to be great. I think the challenge, the thing I've realized this week is, and I know I've said this before, but it's really hard. Virtual conferences, I find as an attendee, are hard because it's very hard to separate yourself from the day-to-day. It's almost, you need to take time off work, you need to use a non-work laptop, you need to take yourself somewhere where you won't be disturbed, and then you can kind of indulge yourself in the conference session content. Loads of people, myself included, are not always able to do that, so you're cherry picking sessions, and that's okay, because that's better than nothing, right? I would rather take one good session this week than not, and if that's what it means, because of work, because of this crazy quarantine style living we're in at the moment, where we're not sure if it's work and we're not sure if it's life, and it's just everything all together all the time. If I can get 1 or 2 sessions out of this week, that's great. The content is all on demand. If I can do 1 or 2 sessions a week for the next month, 3 months, that's still loads of good content. So don't feel you have to like lock yourself away and watch it all for a week. That would be amazing. That's the dream. But if you're going to do that, like, you need to separate yourself from work somehow and life. If you're able to do that, that's great, but don't beat yourself up, I think, if you're not, because most of us are not able to do that. Don't know where I went with that. Bit of a ramble. Anyway, have a great week. Whatever it is you're doing, stay safe. Try and get some sessions in if you can. I'm going to try and do this interesting new stuff on the bot framework, and if I do it, that's going to be some more code and some demo stuff, and probably a video out of that as well. So kind of fun thing I'm kind of doing in lockdown to kind of make our lockdown life a little bit easier here, so look out for that. Other than that, have a great weekend, whatever it is you're doing, and I will talk to you again next time.